Hey, I'm ZSH Plays. Welcome back to Jurassic Park. Today we're going to be building one of the most iconic scenes in the film, the T-Rex paddock. But before we get to Rexy and his little pal, we need to build a habitat for the first stop on the tour, the Dilophosaurus. The first dinosaur you see on the tour in Jurassic Park is the Dilophosaurus. Watching the film, the first thing I noticed just as they start to get to the habitat is they drive past this low concrete wall. So we're going to build one of those. Really simple, we're just going to use this one piece here. Make sure it's lined up nicely with the track next to it. We can check that easier if we move it over towards the track. And then once we've got a nice curve made, we can just turn that into a group and then duplicate that around the rest of the curve, and then that's the concrete wall done. In terms of the dinosaurs on this tour and the routes that the tour takes, we're going to follow the routes established in the film and then add in the other dinosaurs as well, starting with our Dilophosaurus. We've built the little concrete wall that runs alongside the road as they enter this part of the park, and now we're going to build the little area with the sign that you see the cars go past as they hit the habitat. I find it's best to use the foliage brush to get as much foliage in as possible and then add custom plants yourself. We're going to put all the plants in around this sign here, get it nice and close to the track, and then we'll put the fence in for the Dilophosaur habitat. Now, how big was the Dilophosaurus habitat? As far as I'm aware, we don't know. But watching the film, it takes exactly 40 seconds for the vehicles to drive past the habitat. So I've set up a little test to see how far the Ford Explorers, not Jeeps, can drive in 40 seconds. There we go. And then we will make the habitat exactly that long. Thanks for all your suggestions in the comments on the last episode, by the way. I have made various improvements off the back of those. Removing the invisible fences around the raptor pen, thanks to Blue Fog for pointing out that we don't need those. Adding the cargo container to the visitor center, thanks to Dylan Perkins for that. And the main one, which is that I forgot all about the Safari Lodge, which was in the early drafts for the film and the concept art. We will be building a custom Safari Lodge in a future episode to finish off the visitor compound. What we're doing here is adding the flashing warning lights to the Dilophosaur fence. There's the orange lights that you see flashing in the film. This one looks really nice, but it doesn't flash. This one, however, does. That is exactly what we need, so we will use that one, and then we will add these to every other fence post. One thing I would really like to see in Jurassic World Evolution 3 is a feature that is in Planet Coaster 2, which is that if you're adding items to a ride, or in this case, a habitat or a fence, anything where you're going to have lots of the same thing, like posts on a fence, you can just add the items you want to one thing and then get the game to automatically add it to all the others for you. That would be so useful when you're trying to get habitats exactly the way that you want them. Next up, foliage and terrain. So we're going to use the foliage paint first of all to get some lower vegetation down the side of the fence, and then we're going to raise the terrain very slightly inside the habitat a bit back from the road, which matches what you see in the film and gives better visibility for the dinosaurs. Once we've got all of the terrain sorted, we'll go in with some custom planting. This is one of the best plants that's been brought over from Planet Zoo, I think, the Scavola bush. Especially if you scale it up, it is perfect for ground cover. You can just use these bushes to fill in huge spaces in the habitat. It always looks good and gives you that kind of tropical, jungly feel. Just remember to rotate each one before you put it down so they don't all look the same. I'm spinning them manually before I place them here because I hadn't realized at this point that that is actually a random rotation option in Jurassic World Evolution 3. I think you can only use it in the advanced move mode, so thanks to R97R on Reddit for pointing that out to me. We're mixing the tropical wood cover and the East Asian forest wood here. I think that's the best combo to get the look of the Jurassic Park film and the actual foliage you see on Hawaii. We'll fill the habitat with that. It's really full in terms of foliage in the film. And then we're going to do some more custom foliage on the opposite side of the track to get everything atmospheric. We'll add an end cap to that concrete wall, add some food for the Dilophosaurs, replace all the foliage that placing the feeders removes, add some water for them, and then we'll go in and get some dinosaurs. I went back and forth on the skin for them, but in the end I think Svalbard and Chalcarana does a good job of recreating the Dilophosaurs from the film. Let's check out the habitat. It is so atmospheric when you drive in here. I absolutely love this. Even with the pretty much non-existent modular building that we've done in this habitat, it feels so much better than it did in Jurassic World Evolution 2. Everything just looks really good. We will need to do a lot more building for the T-Rex. There's just one thing missing, the Dilophosaurs, and that's because they're nocturnal. I bred them that way to match how they acted in the film. This one's awake though, so we'll take a look at her. They almost looked cute when they were asleep, but they certainly don't when they're awake stalking through the forest here. Right, that's the Dilophosaurus habitat. Let's move on to the Tyrannosaur. One of my favourite things about the T-Rex paddock, apart from the T-Rex itself, is the fact that it's got huge mountains and hills behind it. kind of reefed in fog and covered in trees. It looks amazing. We got various kind of viewpoints like that on this map, but unfortunately they're all at the other side of the map. I found the kind of perfect spot for the T-Rex habitat, but if we put it there, it's going to take about half an hour to get there once you've gone past the Dilophosaurus. So what we're going to do is build our own big hill and cover that with trees. This was a lot of fun. I love the terrain tools in this game. You can create hills, valleys, canyons really easily, and if you're careful with the tools, you can make them look really realistic as well. We've raised the terrain up using the ramp, and now we're going to use the flatten tool to start sculpting ourselves a big hill here. We want lots of height variations at the top, a pretty steep slope at the side that we've already created, and then we're going to have a more gradual slope at the other end. Not worried about the terrain painting or trees or anything like that at this stage, just trying to get a natural shape that looks good and is tall enough to be visible behind the T-Rex habitat, which is of course the main thing that we need to achieve. Once we've started getting the basic shape in, we'll use the smooth tool to start getting rid of some of the more sharp edges, although we'll leave some of them in there for interest as well. And then we'll put a more gradual slope in going down the other side, and then we can start terrain painting with some of the cliff and rock textures to make it look more realistic. This is going to be the backdrop to probably the coolest habitat in the park, so whilst it's going to be far away, I still want to make sure it looks really good. So we'll do loads of terrain painting, and then we'll get the foliage brush out and start putting as many trees and rocks on here as we can. You can't get it onto the really steep parts, unfortunately, but now we've got modular building, we can fill all that in with trees as well. I'm using the kapok tree here. We're going to cover a big section of it and then group that, sink that down into the ground and start duplicating it. With that done, we'll add one final tree and we end up with this looking really good. I think that's a suitable backdrop for the habitat. Let's start building that. This is the spot set aside for the paddock. Ignore all the water, that'll all be going. This is sat just in front of that big hill that we just built. And the first thing that we're going to build is one of the big puzzles of Jurassic Park, the huge ditch in the habitat. People have tried to work out the exact geography of this habitat for years because it doesn't seem to make any sense in the film. And to be honest, I don't know why they even tried, because Steven Spielberg himself was told by one of the crew when they were filming this scene, this big ditch that the car falls down makes absolutely no sense. Aren't people going to get confused by that? And Steven Spielberg said, there's a massive T-Rex on screen, no one is going to notice. So that's straight from Spielberg himself. The layout of this habitat in the film makes no sense, so we're going to build a layout of it that does make sense, or some sort of sense at least. It's mentioned in the film that Jurassic Park has huge concrete ditches surrounding it to keep the animals contained. And the one that we see in the T-Rex habitat is the only one that you see in the film. And as has been pointed out many times, it appears to be in the exact same spot that the T-Rex was happily standing in a few minutes before. So we're going to imagine that it is a retaining wall to support this terrain here, and the rest of the habitat is at pretty much the same height level as the road. That gives us a reason to have this giant concrete drop-off here. It's a piece of terrain, probably to do with drainage or something like that, that needs supporting with a concrete wall. So we're going to build that with these pieces here. And we're using the decals to mark out the squares that you see in the concretes when Grant and Lex are hanging from it. It looks a bit bare at the moment, but once it's surrounded by foliage and rocks, it's going to do a really good job of replicating what you see in the film. We'll fill in the rest of the terrain now so that it's up the same level as the top of the retaining wall, and then smooth out the gaps so we have this lower area here so that it makes sense. And then we'll put the fences in. So we'll get these as close to the habitat as possible, like you see in the film, run them past the retaining wall, and then down to the next part of the habitat, which is where we're going to have the goat feeder. Such a classic moment. It's a shame we don't have a goat feeder where the goats are stationary, but we'll make do with what we've got. This is the spot just here. So we'll place one in now, on that nice and close to the road, and then we'll start tidying up and finishing off the big concrete wall. We'll use some concrete floor pieces to join it onto the road. Fill the rest of it in with foliage, and in this little bit here where the foliage brush won't do anything, we'll put our own foliage in. So loads of these palms, and then we'll get some more of the Scavola bushes in, fill the area in with those, and we can have some of them hanging over the top of the wall as well, which hides the little gap in the terrain there. Looks really good. And we can move on to the tunnel that the cars come out of before they hit the habitat. There's a whole load of arch pieces in the game. You can see them on the left here. But unfortunately, all of them are either too big or too small to build what we want here. So we're going to take two of them here and then just customize them to get them to the right shape. And then we'll use the big Jurassic Park columns to start building a tunnel that looks like the one in the film. So we'll get one of these on either side of this arch, The arch piece itself is just a guide so that we can have something to build around. That won't be visible in the final build, and then we'll start copying them behind each other to start turning it into a tunnel. It's a pretty simple build this. I think there's only 3 different pieces in it at the end, but it matches what we see in the film, so I'm happy with it. Something else that just occurred to me when I was watching the film, which is testament to how good the film is that the layout of the tour in the film doesn't really make a whole lot of sense if you think about it. If you were designing a tour of a dinosaur park, the absolute last thing you would do would be to put the T-Rex second. It'd obviously be the climax, but we're going to follow the route established in the film, and to be honest, I was too excited to get to the T-Rex habitat to have it any later in the tour anyway. We're almost finished with the front of the tunnel here, just getting these pieces in place and rotating them and tidying them up so we can get something that looks like how it does in the film. It's got this kind of alternating height on the roof, and once we've got it in there, we can then copy this backwards to create the rest of the tunnel. Now, you can't actually create tunnels with the terrain in this game. There's no way to kind of punch through the terrain or anything like that. So we're going to make the tunnel itself out of rocks. We've already got this big rock archway in the rocks in the game. We're going to use this for the majority of it, and then we can surround it with terrain so it looks like a proper tunnel when it's done. Once we've got all of those rock pieces in, what we're going to do is go in with the terrain tool and start raising the terrain on either side of these rocks, making sure that it doesn't raise up in the middle so that the tour can still get through here. We'll do the same on the other side. Once we've got the terrain to the right height, we'll use the flatten tool to make sure it nicely melds in to the tunnel, and then we'll start putting foliage all over the terrain until we've got as much of that in as we can, and then we'll start putting in some custom foliage. We've got some ivy coming off the concrete in the tunnel, and then we've got some palms and ferns and things like that in front of it. More scavola bushes to give us some ground cover, and then we're going to sink some trees in to join the rock arches onto the concrete so it looks like this is genuinely coming out of the middle of a hill. Finally, we'll use some of the large rocks to attach the top of the tunnel to the surrounding terrain, and we end up with this. Very happy with that. Let's finish the habitat. We'll add some lights to the fence here as well, 2 this time, orange and blue, and then we'll move on to the goat feeder. So there's a danger 10,000 volts sign on the fence in front of the goat feeder. Then we'll get the foliage brush as close to it as we can, and then we're going to make the dry grass and hay that you see surrounding it in the film. We're going to do that by sinking in this dry bush all around the goat feeder, and then sinking it down even more and making other patches of kind of dried grass around it so it looks natural. And then we'll use the foliage brush to surround it with jungle so we can get the exact view that they see in the film when they look out of the windows of the car. We'll take a quick look at that here, coming along nicely. And then we're going to go and finish off the retaining wall area. The join between the terrain and the concrete has the potential to look amazing, but it's not there yet. So let's fill that in with loads of different types of foliage. And then we'll use one of these big rock pieces to cover up that piece of terrain there. There we go. That looks a lot more natural like that. It's time for the single most important item in the whole of this build, the toilet. Because what every T-Rex habitat needs is a small wooden toilet just outside it. We'll surround it with foliage, and then we'll use the dirt path to create a path up to it. We'll put the T-Rex sign on that you see in the film here. I noticed in the film it's got a blue photography symbol on it, like this is a good spot to take pictures, or not. So we don't have that exact sign in the game, but we do have some signs in that style. So we'll put a blue T-Rex sign on here, put a couple of plants in, and there we go. One toilet that you should probably never ever use. Time for the final part of this build, the water pipe that Lex hides in. We don't have any water pipes in the game, but we do have this circular fountain, which will do nicely. So we're going to take this, scale this down to about the right size, recolor it to match the metal pipe in the film, and then we're going to use some of these planters to create the back of it. We've already got water coming out of it, which is very useful. So we'll just fill from the fountain at the front to the retaining wall at the back, get it in the right position, use some of these amazing puddle decals. I love these. Scale these up to create a little lake at the bottom. And there we go. The T-Rex paddock is complete. Let's check it out. Here we go. What could be a better thing to do on a beautiful sunny day than to drive down and have a look at the T-Rex paddock? We've got the mountains in the background, some very nice fences, and there's even a cute little goat to look at. Only one problem, no T-Rex. Maybe we'd have more luck seeing him if we came back to the T-Rex paddock at night time. There she is. I wanted to see how close we could get to the scene in the film with these shots. And I think the answer is pretty close. If you're enjoying this video, don't forget to hit the like button, and if you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe so you can catch the next episode. This was so much fun to film. The lighting engine in this game is absolutely incredible. The way the T-Rex is highlighted by the headlamps of the car there. Let's take a look at the whole habitat. There's a retaining wall. Thank you so much for watching, as always. In the next episode, we will be building the sauropod swamp, the Gallimimus field, and I think the safari lodge as well. So I'll see you then. Bye.